So these are examples of flares that I got. These are actually Adobe, well, they're Fotolia. They're Adobe stock now, but got these back when it was Fotolia. So let's just take this one here. All right, so let's save what we've got here. Everybody like that though? Isn't that cool? So hopefully there's some tricks in there you can use. You know, again, you're not probably wanting to build an exact poster like that, but there's certainly a lot of tricks in there, especially with lighting in 3D that you can really play around with. All right, so here you've got a flare image on a black background. This is typically how you're going to find them, because you find a flare in a white background, let me know how you see it. So what you need to do is, first thing is remove the color. And let me just point out real quick. Let's just take an image. Because I want to show why it's advantageous to make this a brush. So I just picked an image here, but I'm going to take this flare as it is. Now, my typical thinking at first was take the image, let's drag and drop it over, and scale it into the image, change the blend mode to something like screen, and it helps blend in there, and you can move it around and enhance the glow or something like that. That looks great, awesome. And that works fine. You'd do a little bit of masking and adjusting, and that will work well. But then you'd have to do that every time you'd want to use the flare. You have to go and open up the image and do all that. So then I thought, well, it's a simple enough element. Why not make it a brush? So the first thing you need to do, well, of course, the first thing I thought was, if I make it a brush, I'm going to lose the cool coloring. But that's where the layer style comes in later. So let's first take the color information out. So Shift-Command-U desaturates the image. Now, when you're defining a brush in Photoshop, let me actually size this down a little bit for the sake of speed. When you're defining a brush in Photoshop, Photoshop looks at the image, and you can define an entire photo as a brush if you want. It looks at the image. The darkest areas are going to be the most opaque areas of your brush. Gray areas will be transparent, somewhat transparent, depending on how light or dark they are. And white areas will be transparent. So if you define the brush and with this image as it is, you're going to end up with one giant, dense black brush with a flare hole through it, if we were to define it as it is now. So we're going to need to invert it before we do that. So press Command or Control I, or just go under Image Adjustments, Invert, reverses the image. Now, occasionally there might be elements that go right to the edge of the document. And if you define it as a brush, as you saw a while ago, that little area I had to clean up around the corner of the ring flare, that's a little bit of the residual background you may see. So you want to take care of those edges and even the lighter gray areas that are almost not even visible. What I mean is you want to make the background as pure white as possible. So I'm going to use levels and just kind of push the highlights in here. Notice I'm losing a couple of the little rings here, which you can barely see on the screen there. But there's a couple of little ring flares kind of emanating off of this. I'm not too worried about that, losing those. So I'm going to force this background a little bit darker white. Now don't go too far, because you notice you start to lose detail in the flare. You don't want to do that. You want to keep as much detail as you can while still keeping that background white. Here we go. Now in the event there's elements, see this flare element's still going right to the edge here a little bit. So I'm just going to use a simple gradient, make my foreground white, and just kind of fade that in a little bit. All right. So now all you got to do is define the brush. You don't have to make a selection. As I said, it's going to ignore the white. It's going to leave that transparent. So just go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and name it. And now you have a flare. So if I go and get my poster, because there's not enough flares in this image yet, I went a little JJ crazy this time. But you'll see that it automatically selects the brush. It's already in the shape of it. So on a new layer, I'm going to size the brush up here a little bit. And let's put it back in normal. If I just dab right off the edge of the document here, you can just go crazy adding flares. But there is the flare that we just created, now defined as a brush. So once you add it to your element, it's just a matter of adding whatever custom outer glow you want to it. You can have it be a cool flare or a warm flare. It all depends on the nature of your image. But now you've got an arsenal of flares ready to go. So it's just that simple to define it. Cool.